The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. And we conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting Attorney General apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report, after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime.
So that was former special counsel Robert Mueller back in 2019 explaining his decision not to make a determination on whether then-President Donald Trump had committed federal crimes while in office. That historic decision is one of the topics discussed in the new book from 3 former prosecutors in Mueller's office entitled Interference, the Inside Story of Trump, Russia, and the Mueller investigation. Joining us now, 2 of the book's co-authors, Aaron Zebley, who served as Mueller's top deputy, and Andrew Goldstein, who helped lead the obstruction of justice investigation into Donald Trump. Andrew, I'll start with you. Are Americans misinformed about the outcome of the Mueller investigation?
I think they are in part. The way that Attorney General Bill Barr ultimately released our findings and put out his own summary of the report before actually putting out what we had written made it so that the report and what he put out understated the amount of interference that the president did in the investigation and understated the extent of Russia's interference and the Trump campaign's willingness to benefit from that interference.
So let's stay on that topic, Aaron. The idea of the Attorney General sort of whitewashing the findings of it, putting out that letter first. I recall that the Mueller team, you guys put out a clarification soon thereafter, but was there discussion about doing more, about pushing back further to say, look, that's not the real story?
Well, there were a series of steps that we took after Bill Barr's letter came out on that Sunday, the 24th. The morning after that letter came out, I called the Department of Justice and I pressed for them to release our executive summaries and our introductions. And in fact, we redacted them that day and sent them over that day and asked that they be released. We considered other steps, but ultimately we went with the letter that we sent, that Bob sent on Wednesday.
So, Andrew, take us behind the scenes here about the debate whether to subpoena the then president.
Look, we wanted to speak with the president. We thought it was important to understand what his intent was in taking various actions, like firing James Comey. Was it because of the Russia investigation? And we also wanted to know and question him about the different contacts that members of his campaign had with various Russian intermediaries. He, over a long period of time, made it clear through his lawyers that he was not going to testify willingly. We considered a subpoena. The difficulty is that by the time of the investigation, where a subpoena would have been the right thing to do, it was very late in the investigation. At that point, we had information from a lot of other sources about the president's intent and state of mind, and a subpoena would have dragged the investigation out for possibly a year or two, and we may never have heard from the president. And so we made the decision not to subpoena him.
So, Aaron, given the passage of time, and it seems like a century ago that we were talking about this as a live news event.
Yeah.
But given the passage of time and the events that have occurred within that time, all of the charges that could have been leveled against then President Trump, many of them could still be leveled today, I would assume, despite maybe a statute of limitations running on them. But what would happen today, given the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity?
Well, it's hard to know with certainty, but you're right. It's unclear that anything could actually proceed at this point. The recent Supreme Court decision is that the president is immune for official actions, and a lot of what we were examining probably falls within the ambit of official actions. Firing Jim Comey, he's an executive officer, that's probably an official action. Terminating a federal investigation, the investigation of Mike Flynn, for instance, probably an official action. So it's unclear that much of what we did could have been investigated, and real question about whether any of that could actually be charged.
So, Andrew, sitting there, all the work that the group did, all the work is still there. It's still out there. It could still be looked at, if not for the Supreme Court decision. How does that make you feel in terms of the effort and the energy that not only you two, but the entire team put into this investigation?
Look, one reason we wrote the book is to show in, I think, very clear terms what the investigation was really about, how we made the decisions we made during the period of time, and to look back at the facts that we looked at and uncovered. That Russia did, in fact, interfere in a very sweeping way. Russian military intelligence hacked into Democratic Party accounts and then spread stolen emails in order to hurt Hillary Clinton and help Donald Trump. We detail that in the book in a way to try to bring back, what it was that we thought the investigation found.
Mike, do you mind if I add to that? One thing I would add is a central message of this book is that it is critical that there be a method or a mechanism for investigating a sitting president, whether it's Donald Trump or any future president. That's a central message of this book.
Andrew, I'll go to you first, but would love to hear from both of you on this. It's become gospel within the MAGA world that the Russia investigation was a, quote, hoax. He says, Donald Trump, Russia, Russia, Russia. They didn't find anything on me because you didn't recommend charges against the former president, despite the cataloging of the obstruction that we found in the cataloging of what you started to lay out, Andrew, here, that Russia did, in fact, do during the 2016 election. So I'm just curious, as someone who has seen all the evidence, studied this as much as anybody on the planet, what is your reaction to the idea that Russian interference in the 2016 election was a hoax?
Look, it's a problem. It was clearly not a hoax. The dismissal of the findings of the investigation, I think, has a long-term effect. Russia is interfering in the election now, by all accounts. Intelligence reports are showing it. The Department of Justice is bringing cases that show Russian interference. And Americans should know what a foreign power is doing to try to affect our elections. We don't want elections to be decided by a foreign adversary. We want elections to be decided by fellow Americans.
The only thing I would add to that is one of the critical ways that we can defend against foreign election interference is just by understanding and knowing that it's happening. So the message has to be, this is happening, be aware.
All right, the new book, Interference, the inside story of Trump, Russia, and the Mueller investigation is on sale now. Co-authors Andrew Goldstein and Aaron Zebley, thank you both very much for coming on the show this morning. We appreciate it.